Okay, let's dive again into the depth of the integral theories, philosophies, and practices. So we explored in the beginning of our inquiry the name integral itself and its relatives like integrating, integration, integer, the Latin name, it comes from integrity, related concepts like wholeness, holism, entirety, inclusion. And then we went into a small exploration of its homonyms and antonyms, like the different characters with which it interacts and which define its exact role, its exact position. So what I want to do today is present a small fraction of a type of integral, you could call it theory, but an integral framework. So it's often thought in modern times that integral approaches are a new thing dating from, say, Ken Wilber, or dating back to all the original works from which were derived the ideas that Ken Wilber articulates or synthesizes. So it would go back then to Aurobindo and Gebser and writers like this. I'll just explain some aspects. What I'll try to do here is show that the integral striving is obviously much older than this, and has been a structure of thinking that is prevalent since forever. This idea would go with the second idea. So you'd have on one side approaches trying to integrate things, to include as many as they can, mapping them out together, seeing how they can work together, and on the other side, generally presented as opposite but reconciled into polarities like trinities, where dual opposition is resolved by the inclusion of a third complementary unit. So in polarities there are complementary opposites. They are not opponents. They are a way to articulate a spectrum of potentials. So between the integrating and the fragmented or the disintegrating, the segregating, the excluding aspects, you'll find the whole array, whole spectrum of possibilities, potential ways of seeing the world and thinking about it. And so my take here is that we can relate all these ways of thinking to the basic way of dealing with information, which would be perception. So in perception you have the focal point of view, or the focal use of any sense organ, and most of the time it's easier to understand it with the sight. So the focal gives you a lot of information about few things, few elements, short or smaller surface, smaller space, smaller time frame. So it will hide relationships, for instance, since it will focus on one thing, making it appear on a background that sort of blurs behind. So one thing you focus on will manifest very fast clear borders. If you try this right now, you focus on anything, and right away what happens is, if you have the entire thing, you'll get very clear definition of what the thing is compared to what it contrasts with, to the background, which makes it appear. So when you use focal vision and then later focal thinking, the fact that things are very clearly and very actually separated and well defined, well segregated into the confines of their borders is an obvious it's basically an obvious fact. It's something you do see. Then the fact that you can clarify what the thing is, but clearly defining smaller units of this thing that appear to your eyes as clearly as the overall unit did. So you can see the borders in this entire frame. It's like you can see the subdelineation, subdivision of something, and you can then define constitutive elements very clearly too, especially if you focus on them isolatedly. So this entire way of using your senses that you could apply to hearing, although hearing is in nature first a general map and not used to such a focal, not basically focal. You can apply it to touch. You touch the tip of your finger and you bring all your awareness of touch on the point of contact, and there you get a lot of information about the texture, about the warmth, the shape, and so on. So on the contrary, if you start to use what's called most of the time peripheral vision, and what can be called also sometimes eagle vision or distributed vision, you get, or global view of something, you get the reverse effect. Instead of having a lot about few, you get few details about many things. Sorry. So when you get few details about many things, the first thing that you'll get is an overall picture. So if you go peripheral, if you're looking at your screen, and if it's like a portable laptop or whatnot, and you can look beyond it, right away the clear definition of the border of your laptop as opposed to the background around will blur. So the laptop's border will sort of blend into the surrounding. Most likely you'll focus further away, so you'll see clearly the details of something else. But if you're more practiced in this way of using your sight, you can get either everything in a blur, or if you've trained it, you can add details, so more and more details to the overall map. So you can find ways to articulate together the two basic ways of perceiving. When you're at school and you receive a ball and you fix the ball because it's an obvious threat, and you make a strong effort of will to try to catch it, oftentimes you just get hit by the ball due to many anatomical reasons of the distribution of the cones and the cells of the eye into the central part and the peripheral part. So the peripheral part has many more than the central part. But another aspect, in a more general way, is if you're focusing on something, you're isolating it from its context, and you're isolating it from the other objects around. While when you go peripheral, or even more when you go distributed, you're spreading out evenly your attention and your awareness and your perception to all the objects into a space or into a space-time. Hence, you get an overall picture that's less defined. The definition of the number of pixels, for instance, that your screen would get, defining exactly what's there, would be lower, but the screen would be much wider, or would show a picture that's broader. Hence, my idea there, which is not, I don't take anything very seriously, so it's not that I think that this idea is better than any other articulated around, but in some ways I hope it's complementary and can add to an ecosystem of ways of looking at all these ideas of integrality, partiality, wholeness, holism versus reductionism and things. And my take will be to try to not resolve the oppositions, because it would be another type of monopoly or monoculture of thinking. So I consider it good that people would think in a very fragmenting way, very breaking down things, analyzing them. It's very good that some people go very deep into the details. And you can hardly, it's difficult to do both at the same time. Some people will, over time, or develop a natural tendency to mix the opposites. But overall, for the entire endeavor, say, of science, if you were not a believer, a deep believer into the idea that through seeing the minute details you'll be able to understand the whole picture and to do things very potent and very important, most likely many people would drop the endeavor, the task. The task is too demanding for little return if you're not a believer. So if you go full integral, full peripheral, and you lose your sense of or your ways of using your sight and your thinking in a focal manner, to me it would not be a gain. Although it's often presented like this, like it's presented as a war, smaller level than integral, into the rational framework. There's this idea that we need to move from mechanistic reductionism to holistic systemic thinking, for instance, or well, organicism too later, even more next level of machines. You'd go from mechanism to machines, and then from machines to systems, which are machines made of machines, complex machines of machines, and then you go to networks of networks, including the flow aspect of things, and you'd end up with organisms and societies, which are organisms of organisms. In each of these, you could say that you're getting closer to the reality of things. If you want to go more focal, each small mechanism, each small elementary component seems to be more primal, more original, and more of the basic structure of things. If you want to go towards integration and holism, then obviously when you jump from mechanistic thinking to systemic thinking, it seems that you've expanded your view a lot. You're seeing the general picture way more. And when you go from systemic to organismic, it's the same. Things become much more lively, complex, vast. You included, for instance, consciousness. Now, if we get one, and so say we go full systemic, and it could be thought of as focusing on the systemic view of the world. If I go full peripheral for my vision most of the time, then I could lock the ability to shift between the types of vision that I can use. I'll lose what's called in English would be the adaptation between distances and between width of vision. I'll get the word back later. So this argument is very common and has a lot of reasons and logic behind it. But in some ways, it's a way to get stuck again into the focal fragmenting aspect. You can focus on the holistic aspect and forget that you need for some task or for some inquiry into some specific things, you do need your focal vision. You do need your focal thinking. You do need your reductionist ID. One common analogy that's used in system theory, for instance, would be if you're looking for a problem in your car. So you have two ways of going at it. One, you look for one specific part of the car that's broken. You look for a deficient piece. To do that, you need to analyze, you need to focalize. You need to find the right stimuli that point you to the specific area, specific mechanism that's damaged or missing due to or broken. So if you use that, you replace the mechanism and your car works perfectly, all is well. If you go back, your car drives, the same problem occurs again, so either the car doesn't work anymore or the same piece breaks down again. Then you need to expand your framework. You need to go beyond just the fact that at the end of a process there's this broken piece, to include at least a few more things that would cause it. And if it could appear in many different areas as many different types of damage or dysfunction. So there you would need to look at the entire idea of a car. It could be a problem at another scale. It could be a problem actually at the scale of the factory of the factory line. It could be a problem at the scale of the plan, the conception of the car. So to do that, you will need to, instead of zooming in, zooming out, and getting more of a panoramic view of things. So you lost a pin, or you lost something into a haystack. Same idea. You can go peripheral to get a glimpse, change of color or something, and then you go focal and you zoom in and you find it. If you cannot access this ability to differentiate and specialize, and if you have only the global picture, then you'll start groping for it in a sort of blur of your perception. So these analogies, they're worth what they, as all analogies, they display commonalities with situations, but they're not replaceable. They're not exactly what they're depicting or what they're related to. So when we go integral, we can, if you want to go the entire way, integrality, as I mentioned, should include its critics. It should include the reverse aspects, notably due to the fact that when we go later into the systemic and ecosystemic analogies and aspects of integral theories, we'll see that any monopoly, any monoculture will unavoidably lead to the same problems we'll find in same agriculture. The same plant, same being, will extract the same things from the land, will reject the same things, will change the land in the same way, change the land or the milieu, the system in the same way. It will attract the same predators, same parasites, same enemies, and it will add up the same biases, the same drifts, the same blind angles, same mistakes. Diversity and plurality are not for sure. They are the only way to weave together complex systems. The fact that one being can take the refuse or the excrements of another one and make it its food or its home, and then digest it and release yet another thing that will be broken down or used by yet another scale or another type of organism, is the only way that you add more and more life, and second, you can regulate or compensate or slow down the positive feedback, like the feedback loops that would lead to runaway effects, would lead to perverse cycles, or what we call the snowball effect. If the same beings are stuck on the same piece of land with no diversity whatsoever, eventually they end up competing altogether, competing in an absolute manner. If you think of an absolute copy of yourself existing in the world with all the same desires, same tastes, same needs, same drifts, same biases, same problems. You are the exact complete competitor of this other you. You have the same box of tools. If someone sees your value, he'll see the exact same value into this other you. And if these other yous are thousands or millions, what you are, the unique treasure, the unique self that you can bring to the world, is unique no longer. You're replaceable. And being replaceable, you're actually in the worst type of relationship you can work with yourself. You'll compete for the same habitat, you compete for the same mates, you compete for the same job, the same things, you get the same ideas. In a way, it can be thought sometimes people look for identity structures to be able to not feel alone, feel a complete sense of belonging in a group where others are the same. So this is part of the reality too. If you lack any commonality with otherness, with alters, with alterity, if you have nothing in common at all, there's no point of contact to allow for this sharing of information via communication. Commune, in French, there's a pun you can do with it. It's like one, comme un. Commune and commons, come, or like one. Commons allow for community, a shared space or field of commons via communication. The process of using existing commonalities to share others. But the communication has meaning and use, and as only if the informations or the capabilities that are shared are different. The community is very helpful when everybody has different sets of tools, different perceptions, different things to bring the others, but the others are lacking. What the other has, if the other is deeply other, you can never have. Especially in some ways you're deeply depending on your exact opposites, or opposites in the strict meaning of something that's in front of you, or in front of you and slightly to the side, or more to the side. Just by the idea that for your field of vision, for instance, what you see there in front, just the very nature of your point of view makes you unable to see with the same level of accuracy. You have many tricks, but you cannot see what's behind you. You need the others that are in front of you, that are opposing you, or that are in alternative relationship to you, to the sides and whatnot, 90 degrees angle, or to your back. You need them to see what's behind. So, getting back to this idea that integrality and partiality, or integrality and fragmentation, division, are not opposed in the way we tend to think about them in dualistic points of view. When I say they're not opposed, obviously you can always make a point that they are opposed, but what I mean is that the integral framework, its very nature will be to take this opposition, to recognize and validate it, and to validate the critiques and the limits of this opposition and integrate them into a broader map, and integrate this broader map and its critique into a broader map still. So the integral aspects, as I mentioned in another video, is very easy to attack, because as perceived as a state, as a fixed entity, integrality, the all including aspect, is a non-entity. A set including everything is no set. There's no inclusion rules and no exclusion rules. It's an undefined set. Thus it's an infinite and indefinite set. So you can say that it has a bag that includes the entire world, excludes nothing, is no bag at all. It has absolutely no uses, either for identification, classification, for moving things, sorting them out. If you need to carry the bag of the universe to move things around, it's the same difficulty as carrying the universe on its own. You don't need a bag. So there's a lot of critics saying that integral frameworks that try to include everything eventually include nothing or contain nothing, just because it's too blurry, too dim. It's the same idea as this focusing and increasing definition, or this zooming out and decreasing definition, decreasing the number of pixels, the number of details on a map. If it gets too blurry, people will tell you that your picture may depict a very, very broad area, but it's useless. Basically, you cannot recognize anything. The same argument would go the other way around, though. So there's a very common critique of integral frameworks, because the integral frameworks are perceived as the incoming new champion in some ways, or the youngster that comes at the old champion of reductionism and scientific materialism. Although this champion is not very old either, is sort of holding the title for now, and you have all the contestants and some newer ones, and so the old points of view try to fight back against what's perceived as a threat to their existence or to their domination. And a common way of fighting back is straw manning the arguments that are presented in front, while still manning yours. And when you do that, you say the integral is too weak, too blurry, whatnot, useless. But if you go the other way around, and if you're the new prodigy going to fight a big scientific reductionistic paradigm, then you'll say that the level of specialization and the level of zooming in we reached is as useless as the very blurry and unusable map that you're describing into, that you're turning the integral frameworks into. It's useless to use a map of hiking at 125,000 for a trip by plane, for instance. You'll have crossed the map so fast that all the fetches that are described are useless to you. You're going way above and you have no use for them. So the same idea would be if reality was the smallest mapping, organizing and perception of the world, then a map made by ants would be much more real than a map made by humans, due to the fact that it displays much more details at a smaller scale. So it's much more realistic in the way we think about a reductionist argument. But if you have a map of ants that are spaced by 1 meter, very detailed into this meter, then you'll meet the paradox of the fractal approach. How big is the coast of England? How long is the coast of England? And how long it is depends on the measurement unit. So now when you're walking, if your stride is 1 meter and you have all these maps added together showing all the details that the ants have to go through, have to go around, you just fly by, or you land in the middle and destroy everything. There's a difference of scale that's massive. To map out details, such small details, to your scale, you will need to make your map bigger than the actual one. In the same way that to map out a bigger scale, you need to make something big smaller so that you can bring it to your scale. If you don't, if you do a map at the exact scale it occupies in the real world, and it's the same problem. Your map is the size of the universe, or your map is the size of the world if it's a world map, or the map is the size of a city if it's a city map. So you need to have this movement through scales, and moving through scales you get back to this idea of getting closer to something and zooming in, or getting away from it and zooming out. And you get back to all the same arguments. Is it helpful to have to have the map of the ants if you're looking for this tiny pin that you lost, and the ants have moved around it and seen it as an important feature of the landscape this day? Yeah, obviously it's a very big gain as opposed to having the map of a street. But if it's the reverse, if you're trying to plan for the entire flow of circulation in your city, your map of ants is just useless. You're lost in details. So the arguments articulated against the integral frameworks and against the integral theories and whatnot, oftentimes they can be reversed exactly. The fact that they are often reversed brings us back to the same problem we saw before. If you're attacked by someone using the straw manning of the opponent's bias, and you do the exact same thing, and you're thinking that you're fighting fair, you're giving back what you're given, you're stuck at the same level. And same level it's not meant in a debasing way. It's pretty natural for people who feel threatened by something to fight back. But if you try to describe your position as a more integrating and transcending one, then you cannot really use the same tools and the same means. If you're striving for peace and you use the tools of war, although, as articulated, if you do not use the tools of war, oftentimes you'll end up dead. But if you do use exactly the same tools as your opponent to win, eventually you end up turning into your opponents. As McLuhan used to say, the medium becomes the message, or the medium is the message. So we see that again and again, like articulating all that's called sometimes the culture wars, the war between the various old strata of worldviews and what's depicted as newer strata that have always existed, but are moving through the landscape. If you picture them as geological strata, maybe they arose at different times, but they've been existing for a long time already. Most of the different worldviews, the integrated frameworks or the integral frameworks, are found way back. But just they're incarnated into individuals or small groups, and they're not prevalent or in the culture. Wilber would say that the gravity center of the culture has not moved towards this strata at a given time. But they can appear, the valley, and then different geological strata are appearing at the surface, and they can be seen above others in some special circumstances. But for now, what happens is you have strata that's floating above in one field. Say in the Western world, the dominant narrative has been what's called oftentimes, not so often, but what can be called the rationalist, universalist point of view. So that can be seen as a way to compensate the biases of the previous dominant worldview. That can be called the mythic imperialist worldview. So you get to the rationalistic aspect, trying to compensate the excesses and errors and side effects of the mythological or mythical aspects. You have more distributive social aspects of things like what's called democracy, but the weakest form of democracy maybe, but still a movement towards that, like going from a very tiny elite of the aristocracy into the broader elite of bourgeoisie. It's already, although it's not the absolute movement that people would dream of, it's still a vector force. It's not a state, it's a dynamic. In the same way, the integral approach as a state is unattainable, or is not even unattainable. It's, as we saw, integrating everything means integrating nothing, making everything work together. Picture a machine, and you try to make a machine with all the different types of cogs or elements that you can find around. It will obviously become very difficult. The machine is specific pieces made to click together, made to fit each other's shapes. So you try to bring everything. You bring the grains of sand into the cogs, and you bring the rats into the middle of all this. The machine will maybe not fall apart right away, but will most likely not work. So the problem with it's not even the ideal, the perception of integrality or integration as absolutes, excluding their opposites entirely, brings us very fast to logical fallacies, to logical dead ends. The same way the other way around, like the strong critiques against the very reductionistic and specialized worldviews would lead to the same ends. You could prove that it leads nowhere. If you break down the world into tiny pieces that are so specialized they cannot be integrated into bigger wholes and made sense of, and you're sure that if you get to the tiniest piece and see understand its workings, although you understand its workings by using frameworks of information that are much wider and much more blurry, but if you get to this, the workings even of thinking thought of as quantum shifts or whatnot, and then you think that you understand everything, you've broken the world in pieces so small you'll never be able to articulate them together. If something is too defined, if the world is made of one unit, of one cog, it's completely specialized because you see it with the absolute detail that makes even something like a genus, like a typology is already a generalization. If you go for full detail and if you go for the reality of things, there's no such thing as a genus or genre. There's no such thing as a type. There's no such thing as a class. These are abstractions. They are broad generalizations that have no existence in this materialistic framework. But it's often taken or often articulated as being the standpoint of modern science, which is not the case if you go to any depth into what science has been or is, or not as an absolute too, but as a vector force or as a notion of ideas. But so you go too specialized, things cannot be organized together, they cannot work together, they cannot be included together. You go too generalized, things are so blurry, there's no way of actually using them. In between, there's still a wide range of interpenetration, of mixed usage, of balancing, of ebbing, and whatnot, which is most of the time what we are doing, because we are not most of the time using our information acquisition tools in the absolute manners that would be the dual absolutistic dual way on of one or the other. We're moving in between what's called extremes. Even the extremes are moving peripheral means that it's reaching towards the margins. It's going beyond. Distributing would be equalizing inside instead of concentrating. So we do use our thinking in all its various ways, and we do use it this way, whether we go for integral or whether we go for, say, the old esoterical ideas or metaphysical ideas, philosophical ideas that are debased now as and opposed to practical application, like or theoretical sciences with practical applications. But if we look closely enough, or if we look broad enough, we see very often that what we criticize in the others, most of the time we're doing, and we're doing in the what we call good compared to our scale of value, or what we call bad. In all sciences, you'll find like a mess of logical errors, of inconsistencies, incompatibilities, and whatnot. And you find the same. You'd have some scales, since it's based on this. Maybe you'll find less than in the New Age storylines. But New Age storylines are not striving for minute accuracy. So criticizing them for something they're not aiming at is maybe unfair. If they're going for very broad feelings, generalization, transcending logic, or using logic, which means a set of propositions that are valid due to the type of experience, in the same way a grammar is a set of words that are valid. So we criticize, when we criticize the points of view of the other, or the tools of the other, with the set of values and measurements that we use for our own frameworks, we get into absurdities. Obviously, so you see that all the time in the critics of medieval thought, or the storylines depicted of the scientific discovery. So a bunch of geniuses unveiling a pre-existing reality on the background of the darkness, of ignorance and crass idiocy. That's sort of implied into what we see as pre-rational thought. But this is very weak, and this is a very strong lack of scientific accuracy. Although they maybe despise weak sciences, or even refuse the term science for the humanities, like history. History is the same as any observation of facts or tracks of fact. So if you go back into the history of ideas, the history of languages and thought and whatnot, to any level of detail, these arguments will break down very fast. Science was not a pre-existing reality that was unveiled by geniuses that were competing, or that were not even competing, were repressed by a crowd of completely stupid and ignorant people. These people lived the way they articulated their thoughts, although the thoughts were taken and reinterpreted time after time. A medieval scholar would understand nearly nothing, most likely, of the modern world and the way science is made. For someone whose logical definition is true or false, the idea that you could try to prove something by using statistical probability, statistical data, something is true because, or is valid because 64% of the time it will display this aspect, which is more than half the time and more than what we deem standard deviation or a statistical valid deviation. So this would seem completely utter nonsense. Either something works and it works all the time, and it's true. Something doesn't work, it doesn't work all the time, and it's false. The shift in logic would be very too strong. So, getting back to integral, what I'll try to do now is use an integral framework of the past. I'll use a very tiny fraction of an integral framework, and this integral framework will be the old numerical systems that you find in most cultures or civilizations of a certain type or certain dimension, certain scale. So you find it in China, you find it in India, you find it in many systems in Mesoamerica, in Native Americans of North America. You find it in medieval Europe. You find it in Middle East cultures. You find it in the Greeks, and so on and so on. So this cosmological system, so the logic of the cosmos in all its different meanings of the whole, the unity, the universe, the world, or the order of things. The logic, so the proper sequential narratives, that's the order, the sequence or sequels of propositions that are considered valid to describe the world or the order of things, can be depicted in many cultures in this 0 to infinity framework. Or quite often in many societies you didn't really have a clear notion of the 0 until quite late, so it would go from the 1 to the infinity. Same doesn't really mean much for, and it can be logically attacked very easily too. So say if we take the Tao Te Ching and what's called now the Taoist worldview, you'd get this sentence of the Tao gave birth to 1, which gave birth 1 gave birth to 2, 2 gave birth to 3, 3 gave birth to the 10,000 beings, which is the Chinese symbol for conceptual infinity of manifestation, a great number of things. So the cosmology there, numerical cosmology, is not an objective cosmology. So it's not numbers taken as abstract elements. It's qualitative cosmology, and subjective cosmology, you give meaning to these numbers. One is not first one object, it's oneness, unity. It's one including all, or one being the sum of or all this type of meanings. And these meanings were not separated from practical everyday use, the way we think about them now. So for now, numerology, the science of study and narratives of numbers, would be deemed not like a complete quackery. Same would go for secret geometry or secret mathematics. But the people who developed these ideas, most of the time they thought in very, very different ways. They had not broken down the world in the small categories we use now. They thought of numbers not as these only tiny tools sometimes. For Pythagorean, the numbers are sort of principles. There's something deep. We do not know how they thought, so I cannot say that I will tell you the real meaning of numbers. It would mean nothing. But still, as a traveler, understanding the commonalities between people through space and time is very helpful. Humans have lived in ways that are related, they shared commonalities. So through these commonalities, some communication can appear, and you'll find ways of making sense of things that were written or that were thought thousands of years ago. But at the same time, it should not obfuscate the very real differences and very real lost in translation effects. The commonalities should not obfuscate the specificities and individualities of the ways of thinking, the ways of perceiving the world, even the idea of a way of thinking and all the words I can use to describe whatever framework I articulate. If I go back in time, I will not find the exact same bags, same boxes to classify and structure and move around the meanings. So, numerical analogical frameworks. 0 is vacuity, the undefined infinity. It is not something. These systems are meant oftentimes to be interpreted as much as learned. So you have tradition, like the static aspect of things, the memory aspect of things is tied and woven together with the dynamic and evolving aspect of things, and with the subjective interpretative aspect, like the relational and relative aspect of things. So content is not only there to be analyzed or remembered or translated. It is there to be interpreted again and again. And you have many things we could go around there. But let's get back to the topic. Integral framework, numerical aspects. Let's skip 1, 2, because 0, vacuity. In this undefined set, you have infinity, and in the infinity you have finite. If you have no pocket of finite in your infinity, it is not infinite. If you have no space of definition in your indefinite, it is not undefinite, undefined. This will be its definition. It excludes this. This will create the meaning of the set. So this unity is again another scale of infinity, but it's a scale of infinity of the manifested, of the finite. So it can be thought of as undefined or undefined finite, or infinite defined. You have unmanifested and manifested, finite, infinite. You get to two, so you get to basic dualities, and these dualities will replay fractally through all levels. So in many cosmological stories, manifestations, existence, like the beginning of things, is the breaking down of unity in two. You get contrast. So you can start to perceive something. From unity, there's just, say, blank space all around. All things are written white, no background and no shape appearing on it. The entire concept of perception of or existence, being out of or away from, originating from something, has no meaning. There's no origin, there's no away from, there's no differentiation from something. So you get to duality, then you get two things you can contrast, but you can contrast them only to the other. There's no ruler that would, or no measure. You need a third thing to compare things together. So you only have this primal dual relationship. Then you get to three, and this duality that can be thought of as the father, mother, the creation principle, and the generative principle. They blend together, mix together, or create together, and generate a third bridge between them. A third, they get integrated into a third principle. So this brings us from duality to polarity, where the dual opposition is resolved by the integration into a broader unit, or by adding up a smaller unity at the point of contact, or as an offspring. So you can keep going through differentiation to 4, 5, whatnot, 10,000. The more you go towards unity, the broader the view, until it dissolves into the unknowing, unknowable, Ein Sof, whatnot. The more you go towards the 10,000 beings, the more you go towards the infinity of manifestation, infinity of differentiation. When you consider our modern way of thinking, in some ways we're going deep into the 10,000 beings, but at the same time we always, like in science or any other framework, you go and divide and differentiate, but these divisions and differentiations of beings, they're looping back and recreating bigger units, bigger social units, bigger units of integrative framework of thinking or of being. This is a common occurrence. You always have these movements in all directions. And oftentimes you'll see, say in spiritual movements, you'll see movements back towards unity, from the 10,000 beings, the infinity, the chaos of everyday life. We strive for order, we strive for permanence, we strive for something transcending death and all that. And so we go back, we walk all the way back towards primal states. Trinity, duality, unity, vacuity, mystery, and unknowable, unknown. When we walk back, it's very common that we recreate, we loop back, but in the other direction, and recreate divisions and differentiations. And oftentimes we recreate essential divisions and differentiation. For instance, some spiritual schools of whatever brand, whatever religion, whatever idea, that have defined the existing manifested world as evil, or as a mistake, or an illusion, or something. Through this sort of essential differentiation and duality, they'll get stuck later on into the process of reintegrating unity. If you have an inbuilt bias towards duality that you cannot even think about, you cannot reintegrate unity. Your unity is always the good minus the bad, say. But the minus the bad will track you down in all your practices. So that's another type of loop. So you have all these movements towards the what we would think of the origin, the integral, and the dissolving, and the other one towards differentiation, manifestation, and the one with the breaking down and pluralization, manifestation of differentiation, is looping back to create orders and orders of unity. And the other one is looping back also by recreating orders and orders of differences oftentimes. So let's go to the free. Free is the manifested world in many narratives. It's the offspring of the primal principles of complete chaos, complete order. In between you'll get the manifested world. Sky, earth, in between, or sky, ocean. In between you get the world of the living. Light, primal darkness, and the same idea in the middle. So when we get to the three aspects as an integral framework, if it's integral, it should include and make sense and organize everything. So let's see how they actually work. So you get three aspects. So for instance, sky, earth, man, or depicting, now we could say life, a broader categorization. Sky links to air, the ephemeral, to the wind, to the stars, the sky, the distance, the feeling of expansion, extension, infinity, and broader order. So you have the lights in the sky are what allow us to give shape to the darkness, to the primal darkness that is life at night. For instance, you're groping in the dark if you have lost completely your sense of sight, or you're looking for ways to recreate these lights at a smaller human scale. So the reverse of it is full concreteness, the complete solidity and support of the earth, and from the earth grow the life you feed on. Later, if you define it with more accuracy some aspects of your alimentation, you get to the nutrients that are comprised, that are built into your food, come from the earth. From the earth you'll get some springs, you'll get many things like this. It's where you stand, it's where you can live, as opposed to, say, the abyss of the oceans, or if you try to jump from a cliff, obviously you cannot walk the ethereal. So you're at home on earth, and at the same time deep down into the earth, if you live in the right areas, then you can experience what's hidden there, like the inner fire, the lava flows, the volcanoes, the deep recesses, the deep caves spreading forever into the guts and entrails of the earth. And in between you have the realm of life. And by life I will use a broader category than the one used most of the time. Say the category depicted by Adrien Bézin, for instance, where life is all systems that evolve through time and grow or change. So in many ways, at the sufficient scales, the landscapes evolve, the places evolve and change. The humans, the minerals, and obviously the animals, the all vegetal life. So this is your neighbors. This is your medium where you swim. At the same time, you're swimming into this spiritual. Spirit means spiritus is air, or the breath, the wind. You're swimming and you're living due to the fact that you're filled with spirit, with pneuma, with anima. The same meanings you find, the same roots, prana. And you're made up of clay, you're made up of the soil, of the earth. In the agricultural system, you're feeding of the earth. But if you're not feeding of the earth, you're feeding of animals and plants that grow and feed on this earth. So there's this deep feeling that the mother is tending your needs, providing for you, supporting you, protecting you sometimes from the lights of the sky, so comets, meteorites, and also at smaller scales you get lightnings, you get strong heat, or strong storms, strong snows, and so on. So you can hide around in caves or in protected areas to protect yourself from this. So this system in 3 depicts the entire universe. you can scale it, but it will include all aspects that you can think of in the universe. So spatially, if you have a point of reference, it will just divide the universe into what's below you, what's above you, and what's around you. If it's temporally, it would include what's beyond you. Say, if you spatialize the time in a way that Bergson would not really support, you spatialize time, and then you get what's beyond is the unknown future, the realm of potential. It's very airy, it can be shifted fairly easily. You can see omens, you can see lights, you have the drag of the future trying to take shape by attracting the present towards it. You have the support and the building block. You have the earth of the past and all the currents of inertia that are still shaping the present flow. And you have the present, which can be perceived as just the crest of a wave where you're surfing, but it can be perceived, oftentimes as in this specialized type of space, as just a small block where you stand, as opposed to the further definitions, further fragmentations of time beyond you in the future and the ones behind you in the past. But as depicted by several thinkers and as lived, there's this idea of the present is duration too. It's not a broken piece, it's a felt sense of flow. And the idea is that you can, if you specialize with another type of perception, you go for the observing a river. You stand out of a river and you can break it down into pieces, blocks and whatnot. But if you swim in the river, it's a very different feeling. Although you're moving, if you look at some fixed points behind, where are you in the flow of the river? In some ways you're always in the same water, or it's blending, shifting. It's much more experiential, it's obvious as a lived event, but very, if you try to analyze it, you can analyze the lived experience of being in the flow. You can analyze it only from outside. You can dissect it only if you're not inside. If you're inside, you can live it, but you cannot break it down. And there it becomes a feeling more than something you could analyze and abstract and whatnot. So these three lines, say we get back to fairly simple definition of time: past, present, future, covers all. If you go to a more complex definition of the perception of time, you get fragmented, analytical, and particular definition of moments as building blocks. Then the present as the one spot where you stand, and the future as all the infinite expanse beyond. But you can go to the idea of the analytical time, perception of spatialized time, the idea of duration, complete flow, and the in-between. So you have one aspect would be living in the memory. The analytical aspect of time is the memory. It's a conservation of information. The lived flow is not the memory, it's the emergence of a unique configuration in the now. And that's where creation is allowed, where new things can emerge. In between, so the future there would be just memory of imagination too. So it's the memory of potentials. It's a type of, in some ways it's a type of past. The future you can remember. Otherwise there's no future. There's either the now and the now that you have lived prior. So this perception too would break down into these three: the fragmentation, the unity of the flow, and the states in between where you use both capabilities, which is oftentimes the case because you can stratify your levels of consciousness. So you can use categories of memories while blending in the flow, while swimming in the flow. So same, it will cover, in one way it will cover everything in your experience. It's integral in this way. And the same would apply for many other things, like self, other, in between, the commonalities, the relationship, the intermediary, the point of contact, relations. And we can go on and on and on. So these systems of three can expand into infinity, and they can be reapplied to themselves. So if I take the special definition of above, below, and center, I can reapply it. The center can be broken down into front, center, back, side, middle, other side, outer, periphery, inner, and so on and so forth. At my feet, in the center, closer to my head, or just at level of my body or my arms, in the center. So these things, they do play out. You get the sky. The sky that's below would be the air that you're breathing. The sky that's in the middle would be the blue sky that you see. The sky that's above would be the starry realms. Now, what we would think of as outer space. In between, you'd get lower layers of the atmosphere, middle layers, and then beyond. If you use the tool another way, you could have the air of the spirit that's into the earth, much more concentrated in it. You go to modern science, it's much more concentrated in carbon dioxide, less oxygen, different components. If you go to small caves and whatnot, then you get the air at the layer, the ecstatic skin of the earth, which is the soil. So right above you have the air that's moving around, and then above you have higher stratas of the atmosphere, for instance. So a system, an integral system, can be reused on itself in a fractal way, to using a very, very simple division of the world. You can create infinite diversity. The three aspects of one aspect, the three aspects of each of the thirds that we divided the one aspect into, and so on and so on. And then it can create many, many different pathways of exploration via analogies, via something we call resonance. I won't go into now. associations of ideas, or just the feeling of connection. So for instance, the space, the outer space of the human, or the air of the human, the more ethereal, more moving, flowing, the cloudy space would be the mind. It's associated with the upper part of the human, the head and whatnot. Then the lower part, associated with legs, limbs, will be the earth. It's more stable, more defined, it has more memory, or more continuity, more density. And in between, you'd get the heart, or in other aspects to the core. In many old cultures or many systems, the heart will be linked to the breath, to emotions, but also to the core, the origination of thinking in many cultures, or thinking as the perception of selfhood, of existence. So all these you find in many systems, and you can track them down through the etymologies or uses of the words through time. So we get the sky of the humans, the ground and earth of the humans, and the life and energy of the humans. Information, matter, energy, change, actions. From there, you can go many different directions. The earth aspect can be, all three aspects can be reapplied to all three levels. So the information aspect, for instance, or the sky aspect, could have matter, earth aspect, which would be something like the brain, for instance, would be the material aspect, or the central nervous system would be the material aspect of the spirit, of consciousness, of thinking. Then you would have a flowing, changing energy aspect, and then you would have an airy, non-material, immaterial aspect, spiritual aspect, that you can call many different names, spirit, consciousness, whatnot. You go to the energy, so the energy would depict all the flowing, changing things, so all the flow circulations. So there you would have the material aspect of the flow is the infrastructure, the bed of a river, the roads, the road network. At the same time, these structures would be free too. So the roads would be the energy structure, the energy earth aspect. They have the pathways that are used to move around. The centers, or reserves, or concentrations, cities, would be the earth aspect. Concentration, condensation, centralization. And then the air aspect would be the directions, the management, the controlling aspect, what leads and what guides and what makes things flow one way or another. So it's in a flow system, the flow differential of pressure, all the rules that will push the flow in one direction would be this. In a road system, for instance, if you take the material structures linked to regulations, to control, whatnot, would be the lights, would be the signs, giving direction, destinations, would be also the speed limits and so on, and all the rules of driving, the code of driving, would be a structure. So the code itself would be an informational structure of this, but its materialization, its matter aspect, earth aspect, would be found in these signs or these structures. And the same would apply for energy and for information. Information, you have technology of information like a computer. The earth aspect would be the hardware, the mind aspect would be the software, and the energy aspect would be the energy, electricity used, or also the actions made, the user to. The user would be both beyond the software. The software could be the earth aspect of the information, and the user would be the spirit aspect, for instance. So you see how these systems can be played out in many, many different ways. You take martial arts or you take healing arts and whatnot. You can use these free structures and free levels and apply them directly. You get centers of matter, centers of mass, centers of gravity, as we're called. If you take them at a very big scale, you have one per body, but if you zoom in, you'll see that you have more than one per body would be the capital, so where most of the mass concentrates and most of the flows of mass concentrates. And so most of the time this would be somewhere to the lower abdomen. Depending on your posture, how you move your mass, you'll shift your gravity center. You can move it forward, backwards, up, down. The way you organize your population inside your body will change the shape and will change the location of your gravity center. You can shape or create, you can clearly map your gravity center by deciding on a shape. Your mass is spread not evenly, and it's not formed most of the time. It's in between organs, bones, and whatnot. If you make an active movement of bringing it towards the center around your spine and sort of enveloping it to create a sphere, or first you could create a circle, then you can feel that you have an ability to shape your gravity center and place it somewhere and then move it. So shaping or structuring would be the matter aspect, the moving would be the energy aspect, and you have abilities to plan or to give it directions, give it meaning. That would be the information aspect. Perceiving it too is the information aspect, and you can perceive it in yourself, in the other, in the relationships, so in the blend of yourself and the other. So now you have center of mass, roads, pathways between centers of mass. We saw that the general capital, you zoom in, you make a more accurate map, and you'll see that you have centers in other areas of the body. Here I have a lot of mass. Somewhere around I have a mass center that I can shape to. Here also, but then if I zoom more, I'll find it for my limbs, and I could keep going. So this idea of zooming in and out with systems that will include more or less numbers of elements is something you'll find in all different types of systems. It will make sense of things like, for the energy, for instance, the mapping in 3 dantians or 3 tanden in Japan, as opposed to the mapping in 7 or 12 or whatever number of chakras. It's just based on a level of zooming in and accuracy and differentiation that you want, and also the type of structures you're looking for. So many systems will include higher centers, for instance, and exclude lower centers due to associations of these centers with say, fields of life that you want to exclude in your spiritual system. Very often, like the sexual centers and below would be deemed of less value if you're going for the spirit and going high. So you exclude them. You do not include them in your maps. So we get back. We get centers. We get pathways. We get regulations, directions, systems of management, control, guiding. We can, so the columns are the physical systems of transmission of mass. The main one is the spine, but you have the actual two vertical columns. If I stood with arms parallel and parallel legs, so the two columns that are actually driving the weight of my body down to the earth are not my spine. My spine is supporting my head, and it's landing on my pelvic girdle. But my pelvic girdle is sort of an arch that allows for the central flow to spread to the to the lateral columns. And part of the weight of my limbs and of my body is taken directly from shoulders to the pelvis to my feet and to the ground. So the ways you can use that, you can move from one center. You can move one center. You take whatever center of your body. You can see that you can move up, down, side, front, back, concentrating to the inside, expanding to the outside, in one direction, two directions, 4, 8, whatever, in a sphere. So you can do that in one direction, then in a line, in an axis, two directions, either same direction or two opposite directions, extending or going two directions towards the center, compressing or contracting, dragging towards the center. And you can do that for points, so lines. Two perpendicular lines will give you access to surfaces, and then two perpendicular planes will give you access to volumes. So you have many practical applications of this. You can, instead of just crushing your force on something, you can feel mass and let it flow. The second aspect, what you can do with something, how to move it, how to change it, how to do actions with it, the energy aspect of matter. And then you can make sense of it, you can perceive it, you can give it direction, give it goals, destination, and that would be the information aspect. Being able to read the gravity centers of someone, or the mass distribution, the shapes, whatnot, the vector forces that it gives is the information aspect, one part of it. Then you go to the energy types. You get 3 types of structure. Tanden would be, or Dantian, or chakras if you go to a smaller scale and a different system, will give you the parking lots or the concentration, the cities, the aggregation and concentration of flows in your body and of vibrations, of ability to do changes, of heat, of activities. of electric charges and whatnot. So you'd have lower dantian, central, upper dantian, and they would most of the time be nearly exactly at the same spot as your center of gravity. And why, if we use an analogy, and your centers of mass are where your population gathers, so it's your cities. So obviously in a city you have many people. These people can create change and do have activities that will generate change, generate heat, generate movements and whatnot. So they can also be sort of flaccid and not act much, but most of the time it's linked. Your center of gravity, where you have the most mass, would tend to be where you can exert the more changes. You can have a center of population, and you can have, a center of activity beside it too in a city, and you'd find the same. Sometimes things are off center, they're not aligned. But so that's the main idea. Then all these flows of the first energy, the first thing considered as a movement, as a change, would be the flow of mass. Matter aspect of mass would be static, would be a state. The flow aspect will be the changes, the actions. The information aspect would be the direction of these flows, the dynamic, or it could be the archetypes, the plan of these structures for matter, and then it would be the direction, the lines of evolution, the vector forces, or the destinations, the goals of the flows, the movements, the actions. So you get to the lines connecting these centers. The lines connecting for the energy will be called, depending on the scale, you have you have the central columns, so central channels for the Neigong styles, and more peripheral would be meridians, and in the meridians you'd still have different classifications. The perpendicular ones would be, some would be meridians, and some of smaller pathways would be the Luo system. But you find this mapping of roads, pathways, preferred road sort of pathways, and others would be accidental or practical. So you may have a bed of a river in the deepest spot that can be tracked following the landscape, but you can have a type of events or accidents or circumstances that make a flow go another direction or using other pathways. So these would be also differentiations that you find. And in these, the use of this type of systems, you can move from the central column, or what's called the 0 point or axis of the 0 point in some shiatsu school, for instance. You can move it, and you can train it by taking actually a material object, linking it with it, and feeling what it gives when you shift, not from pushing the ground, but from the feeling of shifting an axis from the center. And this axis could be your spine. You could push your spine forward, but then you can push the area where gravity and the pressures can be received at the same time. You take a circle, you picture equal pressure all around, and you release the pressure at the same time. The point where all the pressure, the equal pressure, will gather will be something you call your 0 point, for instance. If you pile your discs on top of the other, and if you did that for a tube, then the line where the pressure can be received equally at the same time would be this 0-point line. At the same time, it's where you can take the pressure from upwards and distribute it, or take the counter force from the ground and distribute it, or the push you get from your legs, for instance. So this would be the central pathway of energy. It's it's often close, but it's not mapped on your physical structure due to the same misalignment of the spine to the axis of gravity and many things like this. The energies are not limited to mass, so you would have the same things for bioelectricity, magnetism, all types of sources of ability to generate, to alter, or to prevent change, which is a very general personal definition of energy. So you can use your tanden and energy center and move them, expand them, shape them, do many things with them, the same way you did with your mass. And the ways to access it would be, if you use a scaling approach, you start moving your mass, so everybody can feel mass most of the time. If you can't, it's often disability. But most people will not believe in energy, for instance. So if we define energy quite clearly as ability to change or whatnot, then people, there's no difference with matter thought as moving. And it's, in some ways, it will be true, because the first thing that the first energy we use will be mass. First thing will start from something we can't feel. But then you can go for, when you feel something big and you refine your sensation, you can access deeper and smaller feelings. And then you can go a scale of density. You start to get the feeling of moving the hard things, the bones and whatnot. Then you get the feeling of the bones could be thought of as moving a stone, for instance. And then you look for a feeling of smaller, less dense things like sand, a feeling of something moving like sand in a tube, or gravel before, if it's more attached. It's still more broken down, more flowing. And from sand you go to mud, and you access things like your muscles, viscosity, parts of the elasticity. And then you go to water, you get the flows of fluids inside the body, for instance. The feeling of the blood, the pulsing is very easy to feel, but the feeling of air too. So same, many people first will say air cannot, you breathe into your lungs, you do not breathe into your fingers. And the first thing, the pressure created by the expansion of your lungs will create a rippling effect, will create a wave of pressure that will move through all the tissues that are not too dense to block it, and that can really easily or normally extend to the tip of your fingers and beyond. So the first thing you move, or first thing you breathe or you extend, is not your actual breath. It's not the same material breathing. It's the flow of pressure deriving from this. But then later you get other feelings of having a communication of air via the pores of the skin, which is something that it is happening. All parts of your body that are not completely completely impenetrable to air. If you have changes of pressure, you can get air getting in somehow. So same, it goes into a more detailed aspect. Is the same as the air pressure with a house, for instance. If you want to pressurize the inside of a house so that no outside air goes in, you have many ways of doing it now in modern buildings. The other way around, you depressurize a place and then all the air from around goes in. So the use of energies to move things, to move mass, you can use, instead of moving your mass through your muscle, you can use your breath as the supporting mechanism, expanding pressure, and then this pressure will move things. You can use many things. You could move using gravity mostly, but you could use this shifting of the feeling of your energy line or your centers, and you can use the directions and regulating mechanisms of this energy. The third aspect is the information aspect, and there the three structures you'd get is centers of consciousness, centers of thinking, centers of feeling, and you get to the material aspect of it would be called the three brains, common denominations in Taoism, which some long time ago, and the three brains would be a recent denomination, but the idea would be much older in many alchemical systems or esoteric systems or energy systems, and you find it in modern times in the concentrations of neurons, for instance, in between these three areas, first brain, second brain, third brain. You find it, the axis, you could find the material aspect of it in the gut-brain axis, linking your intestinal microbiota directly to your brain, and many other aspects like this. So the columns, you'd add the column, the spiritual column, the column of light, the column of consciousness, whatnot. Many different words relating to this circulation of spirit, consciousness, feeling of self, or the carrying of information. The material column of information would be the central nervous system. Then you'd get the energy aspect of it, and you'd get the information aspect of it. And in the same way, you can move or change things using basically information first. A very simple analogy that I use in martial arts to understand it: you relate matter, energy, and information to types of army troops. Information, you relate it to spies. Very small mass, few people, some capability of creating change, but not so much. Strong focus on gathering information or distributing, communicating information. This information can create change. Then you have commandos, which would be the energy aspect. So smaller groups than the main troops, more than the spies. Strong focus on effecting very targeted, very specific change directly into enemy territory, for instance. So, or very focused actions. And then you'd have the mass of the troops, which the common army. So the movement would start either from moving the mass, moving the common army, and then sending some smaller groups, some units, and then eventually commandos, and then from these commandos sending a few spies or scouts to gather information. But oftentimes it goes the other way around. First you send spies and scouts to know where things are, what you want to do, what you can affect effectively. Then you send smaller groups of commandos and the likes to create conditions that will weaken the opponent and allow you to bring in the troops to actually occupy land and take over things. So these things cover some basic aspects of an integral system in a few practical applications, or a few ideas of practical application. It would take a while for me to show you drills. I've done that partially in other videos, so you can find it on the website or whatnot. Not the website, the YouTube channel. So that's it for now. That's a beginning of an inquiry into how we use integral frameworks, and a beginning of an understanding that many old systems or many modern systems are integral frameworks. A dictionary is an integral striving of including all the words of a language. And so when we start to see this, we can get to the idea of a clear definition of a word, maybe the focal point, and the broad endeavor of trying to bring in all the words used in a language is the integral frame. So that's it for now.